So we continue following those final tributes to former President Jimmy Carter as his body heads to Washington to lie in state. Carter began today's journey in his home state of Georgia. No doubt scenes like these fresh on the minds of people from his beginnings to his service to his upbringing there in Georgia and then his swearing in on his inauguration day. We can tell you his casket left the Carter Center this morning before the ceremonial troops honored his departure at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Georgia. We wanted to bring you some of the more touching moments of today's page in American history. Watch. Ruffles and flourishes, 21-gun salute, hail to the chief, and then on the first note of that Christian hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, former President Jimmy Carter loaded onto that plane, that United States plane, along with his family members, headed to Washington, D.C., where he will lie in state. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us from the Navy Memorial in Washington. Ed, there's a reason the motorcade will stop there once the plane lands. Talk us through that.
That's right, Reed. Good to be with you from here along Pennsylvania Avenue. This is a memorial that was established for the U.S. Navy by then President Carter back in 1980. And of course, he is a U.S. Navy, or was a U.S. Navy veteran. And so the military, who of course is conducting all of these ceremonies in Georgia and here in Washington today through Thursday, agreed with the Carter family to include this along the Pennsylvania Avenue route to the U.S. Capitol. So they will stop here at what is called Navy Memorial, and you can see the various flags. And what they will do here is switch his body out of the hearse that it will be carried into this point, and then to a caisson that'll be drawn by a riderless horse. This is the traditional tribute that the military gives to commanders-in-chief, should they choose to take it, and other senior officers of the military, Medal of Honor winners, prisoners of war. The Carter family will then walk the rest of the route from here up to the U.S. Capitol, doing something in reverse that President Carter was the first to do. He got out at exactly this spot back in 1977 and walked the rest of the parade route back to the White House. More recent history, younger Americans sort of know that as commonplace to see the president, the newly elected and newly inaugurated president, walk at least part of this Washington route. But Carter was the first to do it, in part because, remember, when he was elected, he was trying to eschew a lot of the trappings of the job and make the president a little less ceremonial and a little more human. So it was a big deal when he did it then, and they will essentially do the walk in reverse, taking him back to the Capitol, where he will begin to lie in state later today after a ceremony that will be led by Vice President Harris and congressional leadership. I got to say, though, Reed, between the snow that continues to blanket the Washington region and the incredible, quite robust security operations that are in place for this, I'll be surprised if there is a considerable number of people lining Pennsylvania Avenue for this, other than the members of the military who will stand watch as part of this military procession. It is bitterly cold. This is a snow day, not only for schools, but for most of the federal government that's based down here downtown. And so if it were better weather, perhaps people would come out in the afternoon from their offices. But that plus, again, the incredible security that's in place, not only because of the impending inauguration, but also because of the incidents that occurred most recently in New Orleans and Las Vegas. They've added security operations to this route, concerned especially, for example, about the possibility of vehicle attacks. So you've seen a lot of dump trucks and other large vehicles at intersections buoying what was already in place for security checkpoints and other things about a block south of the route, a block north. So this is expected to occur 90 minutes behind schedule as well because of the weather. Last night they decided they had to push back everything today to allow Washington to do what you're seeing right now, to literally clean the streets and make it so that the Carter family and the military procession can walk up an otherwise unobstructed Pennsylvania Avenue. Reed?
Well, and you and I may find a moment of irony here in that the working man or the working woman, whoever is behind that truck that's there to push the snow, may be somehow separated from the legacy of the presidency of the United States. But Jimmy Carter showed us that the people who power those trucks and do that work, they matter. And he likely would have been the first one to shake their hand and say thank you. Ed O'Keefe, we appreciate your report. We are awaiting that plane to land, and as soon as we see that, we'll have continuing coverage. Ed O'Keefe reporting live. Thank you so much. So let's recap the next 2 days of memorials and tributes. The former president will lie in state at the Capitol for the next 2 days. The state funeral services begin Thursday at the Washington National Cathedral. His body will then return to Plains, Georgia for a private funeral ceremony before the family holds a private interment. And CBS News has crews all over the country, as we just demonstrated for you. You heard from Skylar Henry there in Georgia, Ed O'Keefe there in our nation's capital. All of them positioned to cover and honor the legacy of the former president as our nation remembers. By the way, at 2 p.m. Eastern, a special report once Carter arrives in Washington to begin those state funeral services and all of that tradition.